Welcome back, and today we are talking about short-term achievement tests, which are one of the 6 different types of assessment we looked at in another one of these videos. And these are ones that are very much part of what teachers can do in the classroom. So the goal today is that you will learn about the type of tests that teachers can make and administer themselves in the classroom. So it's worth asking, what is it that makes these tests a little bit different? One reason is that they happen in your class. So you have much smaller numbers than you do when you have high stakes tests like IELTS, TOEFL, TOEIC, those sorts of tests. Because they're smaller numbers, some of the practicality issues that we have talked about on another video are not so important. So this means that you can take the time to use testing activities that are more time intensive. So for example, maybe you'll decide to run one-on-one interviews as a testing or assessment tool because you've got small numbers. Now, you couldn't do this if you had 1,000 students, but if you've got 15, 20, 30, it becomes possible. Similarly with things like seminars, you might decide you want your students to give a seminar, a talk, as part of their assessment of their speaking skill. This becomes possible in your own class. So practicality issues aren't so important as they are in some bigger scale and higher stakes tests. So that's one of the differences. The other one is about the content. Because it's your class, you must relate the material to what you have been teaching. This might seem obvious, but it's something people sometimes forget. Because it's so clearly linked to your own teaching and your students' learning, then it is very much an example of an achievement test. And we're talking about short-term achievement tests, but it's about achieving, have they learnt what you want them to learn? This is an issue of validity, and in particular of content validity. So validity is another term that we've talked about in a separate video, but on this occasion it means that the test needs to relate clearly to what it is that you have been teaching. So as an extreme example, if you had been teaching students some vocabulary, let's say, and then you said you want to assess them using a role play, clearly that's not a very valid type of assessment. So you need to make sure that what you're testing is well related to what you are teaching. So what are we hoping to achieve? The purpose of the short-term achievement tests, as with all testing and assessment, is really to try and foster our students' learning. If we go back to one of our very first videos about the purposes of assessment, we remember the smiley face. We want the students to have a positive experience. Assessment and testing is about promoting learning. So we want it to foster learning. Then we can say, what are some of the questions we hope to answer through short-term achievement testing? One of the questions, the obvious question perhaps, is how successful have my students been in learning? It's a fairly obvious question. A related question might be, what problems are my learners having? Related again, a question like, how effective has my teaching been? All these questions are important. They can help you to decide what you need to give more attention to, where the problems lie, whether your teaching style is being effective. And together, these allow you to decide whether or not the students, the class, are ready to move on to the next unit, the next task, the next activity, or where more work is needed. Remember, there's no point rushing forward to get through a course if the students haven't learnt what's already been taught. So this is important information for the teacher, as well as, we hope, information for the learner about their success in learning that will motivate them to learn more. Okay, so having given that background, let's talk about some examples of possible short-term achievement tests. There are many we could touch on, so I'm just going to give a few examples. So one of them is an old-fashioned one, but one which I'm a bit of a fan of, and that's the spelling test. Spelling test is a great, quick way to get an idea of if the students are becoming familiar with the vocab. Short, simple, easy. Another one might be to give students a reading passage to take home and get them to answer some questions the next day about their understanding of what they've read. Similarly, you might get them to do a closed test around a passage they've read. Now, closed tests are a form of test we talk about in another one of these videos. Very useful, very handy, give you a very quick response, idea of what the students have learned or not. So those are some examples. Now, it's important to emphasize that it's not necessary to get marks taken for all of these types of assessment. We've talked before about observation of learning. So you can use these as the teacher to give you information by walking around, looking at the results, asking them how they did. You can get the impression of the learning that's happened without writing things into a grade book and then wondering later, what do I do with these marks I've written down? A final one I'll just mention is something that a lot of teachers use, and those are quizzes. Now, quizzes are a type of quick test. It's a term that was gained currency in the US, probably from the 1970s. And they have certain features. They're often spontaneous, so there's no warning that they're going to happen. They're very focused on a specific aspect of learning, and they are frequent. So they happen quite often. Okay, so I think that's probably about enough to say about short-term achievement tests. I hope it's been useful and it will encourage you to use this type of activity successfully in the classroom. Thank you.